Hello and welcome to Juicy Scoop. Got a great show for you. Great interview with Chris Hansen from To Catch a Predator. One of the best interviews I've ever done. The juice was dropping. It was shocking. It was interesting. He's got a lot going on and a lot that he is reporting on that is beyond a Jeffrey Epstein type story. Before we get to that, let me talk about the other horrible man in our lives, and that is Jason Collier. This story broke on Wednesday afternoon, and this girl, Cecily, this is her Facebook, but it went public, Cecily Steinmetz, and she she writes this article with photos of she and her fiance. This guy, Jason Collier, was the chief of the city of Steinert, and the story is really hard to follow. It's really crazy. Basically, this guy is a dirty John. He wasn't stealing money from them, but he was a serial dater to the nth degree. While he currently had a wife, he was engaged to two girls. This woman, he ran the Facebook page at his police department. Jason did. He went in and changed it so it didn't show that he was married anymore, even though he was married. This girl, who is his fiance, who's divorced, has a couple kids, so excited to marry him. And he's hitting on all these women in different cities. She goes on to the Facebook page and sees that this girl commented on a post, and she looks into the tiny circle, and she sees that this girl, Christy, in her circle also has Jason in it. Okay, so she then goes, wait a minute. The girls start talking. She posts this. She finds Christy. Christy, he had just asked to marry him. This is such a long post that went on. All these comments, screen grabs in this Facebook post of the girls sharing their conversations with Jason. Jason then, when Cecily goes, you've been found out. Who's Christy? You still have a wife. What the hell, dude? You said you want to marry me. He then writes to her and says, you know what? I'm sorry, but the engagement is off. I cannot move on with you. I can't. This is not going to work because you don't go to church. Because not only is he the chief of police, not only is he married to his second wife, currently still married, and engaged to two other women, he is also a pastor. He's a minister. He is a man of God. And so it goes on. People are going crazy. This is what he would look like if he popped up into your in your dating apps or Facebook or whatever. Jason 41, looking for friendship and then looking for friendship and then more from there, not looking for a hookup. Sincere conversation, building trust and relationship first. Looking forward to hearing from you. What is crazy is when you read his text messages with his two fiancées, this guy is so like, I can't believe I found you. I can't believe you've agreed to be married to me. Christy, the second fiance, he sent her that he had put her as wife in his phone. He was saying, put down a deposit on the venue in which we're going to get married. I really want to do it at this place. She's talking about how he's Honey Bunny in her phone and that her son is like, oh, you're going to talk to Honey Bunny. He's like, oh my God, I love that your son knows that I'm Honey Bunny. I mean, now in discovering this, the way this went viral, more women came out, up to 15 women. He had like 15 girlfriends besides these two fiancés, then people writing from the past. So then this person, and I'm sorry that I guess maybe this is Roxana. Yes, I think Roxana Guido did this. If she didn't, I apologize. It's going around. Can't give credit to everybody who's such a genius in this world. But she goes through all the women on this graph. So we see that his current wife, Opal, who she has not responded yet. There's a Heather, a new person, said she met Jason through a dating app, and they were dating from November to December of 2020. There's also a possible, just goes on. There's all these women. A daughter came forward, but the woman has not come out publicly saying, my mom dated him. This girl, Amanda, she posted several times that she was allegedly still married to Jason and they still have a child together, and she wanted some answers. So now there's like another wife. It's going crazy. Within hours of this thing going viral, he took a leave, or the police department gave him a leave of absence. So he's no longer running the police department. I don't know if he's still a pastor. I don't know what his wife's doing. He has 2 kids, I think, from the first wife, and then the second wife had 2 kids, so he had 4 kids. But then this other woman says she has a child with him. And then I thought this was really funny. Someone posted this. The next time your man says he doesn't have time for you, remind him Jason Collier was juggling being a police chief, a wife, 4 kids, a minister, a Pinterest page, 2 fiancés, 2 coffee pots, and 17 girlfriends. The coffee pot is funny because when people took the hours to read all the comments of all these different women coming forward, this girl shared that he was buying her a coffee pot because she didn't drink coffee and he liked coffee. And then they would go, oh, he told me that his son broke a window. And then the girlfriend goes, oh no, that wasn't his son. That was my son who broke a window. So the window really happened, but he said it happened at his home when in fact he was like a state away with one of the fiancés. It is insanity. I hope it's a movie. It might even be too hard to follow as a movie. I don't know. But cheers to Cecily. And Cecily, if you'd like to come on Juicy Scoop, I'm going to try to get a hold of you. Thank you for cracking the case. Thank you for spreading the word on Facebook and making our life so enjoyable, because it was crazy. But I'm also very sad that, the internet is able to give these guys a tool to woo so many women. And what is he getting out of it? He wasn't getting money from what I can tell, but he had different credit cards and he would purchase, he definitely treated the women to things, gifts here, the hotel room, a dinner. He was paying. So I need to know, I guess it was just an ego boost. I guess he was just a love addict. I guess it was that type of thing where he was excited to see a woman get excited about being in love with him, like totally love bombing someone. And you thinking, yeah, oh my God, I found this great guy. Sure, he's divorced, but he's a police chief and he's a man of God. And, and one girl got engaged like within weeks of meeting him. And you don't blame anybody for falling in love. When someone presents themselves in such a fabulous way, you're like, finally, somebody gets me. Finally, someone realizes I am fabulous. And of course they want to spend their life with me. And then you find out it was just all a big fraud and that he's done this to so many women and he gets off on it. He gets off on you being excited about him. It's really sad. Okay, Real Housewives of OC had their second reunion on Wednesday night. So it's done now. The season is done. And there was lots of explosive things in it. It was a lot about Bronwyn, who is now a married woman with a husband and a girlfriend. She's a lesbian who told her husband on stage, I've never been attracted to you, never want to have sex with you, but I had 7 kids with you. And she went on like Entertainment Tonight and said, I have no one on the cast that I can talk about Black Lives Matter or LGBTQ subjects. The girls took that as her calling them homophobics and racists. And they said, that's not true. Like, we went to the drag show when her son was in a drag show. We went to the drag show with you, said Emily. Of course, all the girls have plenty of gay friends in their lives. So they were offended by that. And they have black friends. And, and then they said, well, maybe we weren't at the protest with a professional photographer, with our Gucci boots on saying Black Lives Matter. But that doesn't mean that, we're racist. And she's like, I didn't say you were racist. It was really like pretty explosive. It looks like they really don't like Bronwyn. I don't know what's going to happen with the next season. But it was pretty juicy. I enjoyed it. The reunion was by far the juiciest part. The juiciest part too was that Shannon Bedore brought up on stage that on a drunken night before Bronwyn was an out lesbian and sober, she went up to Shannon's twin, who was only 14 at the time, she's got twins, and said, when you're ready for the good stuff, call me and I'll hook you up. And it was really kind of sad because Bronwyn didn't deny it. She burst into tears and she's like, I don't know if I said it. I could have said it. I wasn't sober. I said a lot of awful things and did a lot of awful things when I wasn't sober. And But Shannon was very nice in accepting her apology, and it just is crazy. So we'll see what happens there. Now, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, which I have been what I like to call hate watching. I don't know. I guess I don't hate it if I keep watching it. I really just dislike this chick, Jen. This is Jen Shaw. And every episode is just her screaming and fighting. And it's so exhausting. And basically the fight is about how Jen, who just yells at people, breaks glasses, is like, you're going to hang out with Mary, who fucked her grandfather? You're not a good friend. And she just screams at everybody. And this little cutie, Whitney Rose, who talks like this, she said she got really drunk at the party that Jen threw for her husband. And she goes, I have something to tell you. Meredith and Lisa are afraid of you, and I know this because they told Mary. Mary is the pastor, female pastor, who married her grandfather, her step-grandfather, and inherited her mom's church, 10 homes, 8 businesses, real shady. And she's got these eyes, too, Mary. And Mary's been barely seen in the last 5 episodes because Jen hates her so much, and she doesn't get invited to anything, and she doesn't want to be around Jen. So she says that to Jen, and Jen freaks out, ruins her husband's party. Then Whitney apologizes and goes, I'm sorry, the timing was really bad. I shouldn't have said anything, but Mary told me that. So now Jen's like, well, who's lying? Are Lisa and Meredith really afraid of me? I need to know if you're afraid of me. I need to know if you are afraid of me. And meanwhile, it's like, yeah, maybe they are fucking afraid of you. I'm afraid of you, and I'm sitting behind a TV set and you're scaring the shit out of me. So they go to Vegas and she's wearing this awful Versace suit that is like, J-Lo's dress, but in a suit version. And they go to dinner and the 2 girls said, yeah, we had such a great time with Whitney. We had fun. We went race car driving. And she's like, well, I'm not over the fact that she ruined my party. And how dare you make up with her? And they're like, what? Meanwhile, she's got this big bodyguard with her. Thank God. I think she really hired a bodyguard so that she wouldn't hit someone. She also threatened to, she said the only reason that Whitney is not dead and buried or thrown in the lake behind her house is because I like you, Heather, and you guys are friends. I mean, it's insanity. Now everybody's like the Meredith girl with the big thick brows and the son who's a fashion designer, Brooke. She's like, you know what? I'm going to disengage in this. I can't be a part of it. Jen, I enjoy you as a friend, but, I really can't deal with it. And I'm going to tell you girls all right now, my husband and I have been separated many, many times over the years. And when we've been separated, I've entertained other people. I've been with other people. I've dated other people. But right now, we're the best we've ever been. So I'm putting it out there. I didn't want to, but now I am. And then her son calls, and he's like, oh, my God, Mom, I had the worst day ever. The dog pooed all over my Montclair navy blue jacket. I'm gonna die. I can't. It's just ridiculous, but I'm watching it, and it's been renewed. And you know why it's been renewed for the 2nd season? Because I think they don't get paid a lot. I think it makes a lot more sense for Bravo to keep a cast of all newbies, pay them $60,000, maybe $75,000 a year, have them come back, even if it doesn't get as good as ratings as New York or Beverly Hills. You know what? They're willing to do it again. You have a girl breaking a glass every scene. They feel like they've got it made. Best line of the night was when Whitney said that the Vegas trip was the worst trip she'd ever been on, worse than when she got her period on a water slide in a hotel in the Bahamas. And I said, girl, I've been there. I've literally gotten my period at Atlantis in the Bahamas. And don't mean to brag, got my period, still get my period. But I just really appreciated that because, God, that does kind of ruin a trip. And when you look back on a trip and you have a bad experience like that, you're always like, God, the Bahamas was fun, but that was such a nightmare. Running back to my room, didn't know where my towel was. It was So anyway, I like Whitney. She's cute, and I hate Jen Shaw. Okay. Army Hammer, I've got major scoop coming next week on this, exclusive, which I'm just teasing now. But another article came out about Army Hammer, our favorite cannibalist. This part's really sad. He showed a photo of his hand a while ago that was stitched up because his terrier bit him. But now people are thinking, based on what his ex-girlfriend said, of how he said he would provoke his dog to bite him and that he also wanted to strangle his dog, they believe that he provoked his dog so much, wanting him to bite him because he got off on it. Very, very sick. Poor little dog. Okay. Pamela Anderson, Baywatch Babe, is married again. And there's a lot to it. Also, not only is she getting married again, 5th marriage, 9th wedding ceremony in her life, she is saying goodbye to Twitter and Instagram. And she wrote this little poem about, how she's saying goodbye. However, she, did a bunch of hashtags of no Facebook, no Twitter, no Instagram. These are all hashtags. So she's divorcing her 1.2 million followers on Instagram, but she is marrying a bodyguard that she's been dating for 2 months but she's known for a while, and everyone couldn't be happier for her. And she got married on Christmas Eve and she revealed it. So I went through and I made my own notes here to tell you about all of her marriages, because now look, it's no surprise that a lot of people would want to marry Pamela Anderson. She's absolutely gorgeous, always has been. Super sexy, Playmate a bunch of times. I think she holds the record for the most covers of Playboy magazine. But I'm always like, it's more than just being great in the sack when someone's like, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. So she's got something magical. She does have a baby girl voice. She does seem really sweet. And again, she's really gorgeous. And she obviously makes every guy she's with feel like $1 million to the point where they say, I want to marry you. Tommy Lee married her. They got married. They were married from 1995 to 98, and that's when they had the 2 kids, Brandon and Dylan. Obviously, she was a fan of 90210. And then she married Kid Rock in 2006. In both of her ceremonies with Kid Rock and Brandon, she wore white bikinis, just a white string bikini at the ceremony. Then she had like 3 other ceremonies with Kid Rock before they got divorced. Then in 2007, she married Rick Solomon. How do you know that name? Rick Solomon was the one who put out Paris Hilton's sex tape. Okay. They get married in 2007. Then they get divorced. Then in 2013, they get married again. And then they divorce 6 months later. Then she meets this guy, John Peters, who's like her neighbor in Malibu. And he's a little older than her, and he's a big producer. And they get married in 2020. And then 8 days later, she says, we really didn't get married. It wasn't an official marriage, even though they had like a wedding ceremony. It was just a really awkward lunch, bizarre lunch. Then December 24th, she marries this guy, Dan Haywers, the bodyguard. And then in January 26th, 2021, she divorces 1.2 million Instagram followers. So goodbye. Demi Moore shocked the world yet again. By the way, still a great autobiography. If you want to read something, I recommend it. I don't recommend her plastic surgeon. Girl, when she was with Ashton Kutcher 10 years ago, I used to feel bad for her because I saw that she was doing a lot of plastic surgery. However, she looked great, but somebody said, oh, she's getting Botox in the top of her knees. And I said, oh, I just hope I never have to get Botox in the top of my knees. I just hope when that really happens, I'm like good to just not show my knees. But when you're like 50 and your husband is 32, then you're like, ugh, I got to still show my knees. Anyway, she's so pretty, but she walked in a runway show this past week and people were really shocked. The face is really fucked up. You can look at it. You can go to my YouTube. You just go to YouTube, type in Heather McDonald, subscribe, and this will pop up every time we have a podcast. You'll see the YouTube, so you get to see all the photos. But it is shocking. It's like her face was like drawn like almost like a fish hook. It's the worst. It is some of the worst work I have ever seen. Hopefully it'll settle down, but it looks like it is a facelift. So I think someone's going to have to go back in there and release it. Otherwise, she's always going to look like like a fish that was caught and is trying to get away from the hook. Just really sad. People watch what you do. Big blog drama happening with Southern Charm. On Thursday, Craig accused Madison. I talked about this with Chris Frangiola. Madison's on the show, and he accused her. Craig was Austin's best friend, and Austin and Madison broke up, and he accused her of dating married men and former professional baseball players. So some people are doing some investigative work, and they think that maybe it's A-Rod. But then someone said, well, A-Rod's not married. He's only engaged to J-Lo. So then people went back and looked at it and said, but Craig said married guys and professional baseball players, Major League Baseball players. Then someone thinks it's this other guy. Then people went back and said, oh, they were both in the same city at this time. And they're like, oh, my God, you're reaching. Like, the point is, I love the investigative work. I love that this came from Bravo and Cocktails on Instagram. I love the amount of work that they went into it. I don't know if it's true. I hope it's not true for J-Lo's sake and for this other guy's family. But there seems to be that maybe there isn't anything. But I love that people put the clues together. So that is something to watch. And I mean, for someone who joined kind of not one of the best shows on Bravo 2 years ago, she certainly has become quite famous, Madison. And she's a single mom, and even her ex-husband, they found him. He's a cute delight, and she still cuts his hair. So she was able to keep friends with him. Now I'm very excited, you guys, to tell you I will be back on the road. I'm coming to Texas. I'm going to be at Houston February 12th and 13th at the Houston Improv. Then in March, I am going to be in Dallas and San Antonio, both in March. So look at those dates, and that's so it's all Texas in February and March. Texas, check it out, and go to heathermcdonald.net. You get your tickets there. You can join Patreon there. Patreon's killing it right now. I'm throwing out so much extra content on Patreon. You just go to heathermcdonald.net. You'll find everything you need along with my great merch. Now, for one of the juiciest interviews I've ever done, I'm so honored to talk to Chris Hansen, To Catch a Predator fame, but he's got lots of other programs and things in the works that we are excited to share with you. So here we go with Chris Hansen. So I'm very excited to be talking to To Catch a Predator, Chris Hansen himself. Chris, I'm so excited to talk to you. Welcome to Juicy Scoop.
Well, thank you, Heather. It's great to be here. How are you?
I am great. Let me just say, I remember watching the show from the beginning, and I was doing some research. I didn't realize it started way back in 2004, in which you've continued to catch predators, and we're going to talk about everything that you have going on. But how did that show come about when you were at NBC and for you to host it?
Originally, I got a tip from somebody talking about a fellow reporter, a friend of mine from Detroit, talking about this online watchdog group called Perverted Justice. And I looked into it, and we called them up and sort of figured out that, if we could combine their ability to be decoys in chat rooms, posing as young teens, with our ability to wire a house with hidden cameras and microphones, it could be pretty compelling. So I pitched the story. It was never imagined at that point to be a completely different show. It was, going to be a segment on Dateline. And so I pitched it, and it was approved, and, a lot of smart people weighed in on it. And we did the very first one in 2004, February, I believe, in Bethpage, Long Island. And I'm driving out there, and I'm thinking, oh God, what happens if nobody shows up? And I've just blown, a lot of NBC's money on this.
Yeah.
Within that, a matter of a few seconds, I get a phone call from my producer, Lynn Keller, who says, where the hell are you? We've got 2 guys due in 45 minutes. You need to get here. And traffic cleared, and drove over the bridge and got there just in time to start the show. But yeah, that's how it started.
I mean, I remember I was obsessed with it. And I was a writer and producer on Chelsea Lately. And I hope you're not offended that we did some parodies of it. I think a lot of people did parodies. And we had a little person on our show, Chelsea's sidekick, named Chewy, and we did a parody
I think I
of it
remember
called
this.
to catch a nugget, because she'd refer to him as her nugget. And you know, we did the whole setup, and it was always like you always emerged from like behind the kitchen. Would you like seek out the houses first so that like the house worked for your filming, and
Well,
then
initially, it was just a matter of, yeah, we wanted to do it locally, close to New
Mhm.
York. We found a house. Um, it was a friend of one of the associate producers who was a retired police officer, rent the house, and we base our setup upon the house. But yeah, it's helpful to have certain things in the house, or in a hotel or whatever we use, to maintain some sort of control over the environment. But yeah, it's important to have the setup so I can appear, so I can have some space between us. And the more recent ones we did in Michigan, the ones on the YouTube channel, Have a Seat with Chris Hansen, the ones that are going to be on television soon, some of them were actually done in a hotel because we had to deal with COVID restrictions. We had to abide by certain rules. It was a whole different ballgame. But eventually we'll do more in homes and apartments and condos and change it up a little bit.
In trying to catch these guys during COVID, were any of them like, ooh, don't get, have you been tested for COVID before I molest you? I mean, wouldn't that be kind of ironic? Like they're worried about.
No, there was none of that in
Oh,
any of
well,
the
good.
transcripts. So, we had, guys walk in from all walks of life. One was a prison guard in the state of Michigan. One was a state employee who had done work in the governor's mansion, a police officer from Lebanon. I mean, here we are, literally 16 years after the first sting, and guys are still showing up. And it's a combination of things, I believe, that continue to make this so important to do. People talk about how the internet has evolved. Remember, Heather, when we started, we merely used chat rooms on AOL and
Right.
Yahoo. Well, today there's Kick and Skip the Games and TikTok and all kinds of online interactive games that provide an opportunity for predators to approach children online. And think about this. I mean, we're all living in the pandemic world. How much time are kids spending online, learning, recreating, doing whatever you do? And the parents are busy on their own projects, working online. And while everybody may be under the same roof, there is an incredible opportunity now that never existed before for predators to approach kids. And one of the reasons behind doing the podcast, Predators I've Caught, is to go back and look at some of these cases, relive them in the moment, take listeners and viewers behind the scenes, and then also, just out of genuine curiosity on my part, where are some of these guys today? And some of the backstories on what's happened to them and what they're doing now are absolutely fascinating.
Yes, I mean, some of the things that were always so shocking is, what about the wife, or the teenage kids that see their dad trying to meet a 14-year-old boy. And, and I remember that once they realized they were caught, once you emerge from the laundry room and they're like begging, oh my God, it's going to ruin my life. I didn't mean it. It's the first time. You know, what was going through your thoughts at that time? And again, in your where are they now? Like what happened with those people and their families?
Well, you bring up a great point, Heather, and that's the collateral damage. And,
Mm-hmm.
during the whole process, I wrote a book actually to address some of those things because we didn't have time in the original series to get into it. But yeah, it impacts everybody. I mean, you've got a guy, for instance, one of the upcoming episodes is a fellow who is a cancer doctor, the head of a major research company in Northern California, Maurice Wolin, who at the age of 48 shows up to meet a teenage girl. He had been chatting with two separate decoys at the same time, comes over to meet one of them. And it's a relatively iconic scene because as he's waiting for the girl to come back out, he goes to pour himself a drink that was at the counter. We're on a back patio at a home. And he spills the drink and knocks over the glass. And so he's so concerned that he's got to find a towel to clean this up. He's got no problem having sex with a 14-year-old girl, but he's going to clean up the mess he's left on the bar, which, was just too ironic. And then he gets busted and we follow his life since the bust and what's happened to him and his family and everything else. And it's fascinating. Some of these people figure it out. They go straight. They don't get in trouble again. And others, like the rabbi, the first episode, he's been in and out of jail like 5 times since his original arrest.
For trying to, or having other victims being a perpetrator?
Violating parole, possessing computer equipment and digital equipment that allows him to access the internet, accessing suspicious sites, getting, financial instruments, credit cards that he could use without his parole officer's knowledge to access certain things. I mean, just a litany of things that would have been, if he was going to really focus and just say, okay, I'm going to go live my life now, get it back together, he could do that, but instead just kept over and over and over again going back to jail.
Are you aware that if any of the people that you caught on camera that aired, did other victims come back out? Like, some girl's 25 and she's watching it and she sees her teacher that you guys catch and she's like, my God, I was never going to say anything. I was going to take it to my grave, but this happened to me too.
We have had that happen a couple of times. In one particular instance, there was a guy in Riverside, California, who, after he was busted in our sting, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department started digging into it and finds, in fact, that, this guy had done 2 different prison terms for sexually assaulting children. One case, he was married to a woman and living in the home, and it was a case involving his stepchild. And so when he got busted this 3rd time, well, that was over. He went away for a long time. But yeah, and we actually interviewed the victim's mother in that case, and it was shocking. I mean, here this happens, and he, gets in and out of prison twice, and they surfaces in our investigation, lurking about, the back patio door of this house coming in. It was just absolutely frightening.
And have you ever, or has the company and the people that you work with, have they ever lured in a female predator?
We've never had a female predator show up in one of the investigations throughout all the years. There was talk one time of somebody bringing their significant other or spouse, but we think that was a ruse. And the reason is, Heather, I think, and I'm not a therapist or a psychiatrist, I just play one on TV when I have to talk to these guys, but the experts will tell you that the female predator scenario usually involves the student teacher. The female predator doesn't like the anonymity, where a male predator likes the anonymity, likes the chase, likes the online access anonymity, and gets caught up in the addictive nature of it. And the next thing you know, they're blurring this line between fantasy and reality, and they're knocking at our door.
And, you talked about how then these people would get in trouble again because they were caught accessing these sites and whatnot. And, with the fact that the internet has had, pedophile rings and all these places, where they find, which I always think is so interesting about pedophiles, is that they want to remain secret. You would think if you're a pedophile, you pretty much want to keep it to yourself. But it's like, why do you think pedophiles want to share other pornographic and child porn with other people? Is it a way to make them feel better? Like, I'm not alone? Why do pedophile rings exist? Why wouldn't these guys work alone?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think it's exactly what you just said, which is, you go to rob a bank because that's where the money is. You go to other pedophiles and predators because they share a certain interest in this very damaging material that is traded in many cases almost openly online. We're working on a story right now. It's going to be on the YouTube channel, Have a Seat with Chris Hansen, on a lawsuit claiming that Twitter knowingly allowed the trade of child pornography in one case on its platform. A young man was duped into creating some images that a predator obtained, and he used them as part of a child porn portfolio. And it was traded back and forth on Twitter and other platforms, but Twitter was notified on numerous occasions and failed, at least initially, to remove this material online. Twitter said that, it has a tough stance and algorithms to detect and thwart the transmission of child porn. But in this case, it was up for a long time and damaged this young man in a very, very hurtful way.
And with right now we see, um, with Facebook shutting down all the QAnon groups and these far right conspiracy theory groups, who one of the things they really got into was exposing who they believed were pedophiles, Hollywood elites, and Pizzagate and sex trafficking that's right outside their door at a Michael's store. And now with Trump leaving and everything, now all these sites are gone. But I'm kind of like, well, why are those? It's interesting that they do it then, but for 20 years they allowed the actual pedophile sites and rings to continue to be able to find each other. What do you think about all of that?
Well, I think, QAnon has over and over again proved to be, just a false narrative and
Right.
not a real thing. And it's unfortunate that the president never really clamped down and said, this is outrageous. You guys can't believe this. Instead, saying things to the effect of, well, I stand against predators too. Well, we all do. I mean, it's a pretty easy stance to take. We're against predators. But if somebody is peddling a conspiracy theory that is absolute nonsense, you have a responsibility to bring attention to it, because what happens, unfortunately, Heather, in those circumstances, is that people start focusing on something that's a false narrative when the real issue is so urgent, so important, and so prevalent in society. We talk about predators and human trafficking and, the girl next door getting caught up in this on so many different levels. It's something we need to pay attention to. And when you get diverted into some conspiracy theory, it takes attention away from the real investigative work that needs to be done.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one thing, the dark side of the internet, which has been so great for a billion reasons, is that bad people and people that are, fucked up. And I can say this, I can say bad words on my show. So, but people that are fucked up find each other, and
well, that's true.
Or get sucked into cults or get sucked into ISIS, and that's
absolutely.
So bad.
And that's the good and the bad news, the trade-off of the internet, which is, again, this 24-hour-a-day access, the addictive nature of it. You could talk to anybody who deals with this stuff at the FBI. Prior to the advent of the internet, NAMBLA, which is a group focused on having sex with children, was essentially eradicated. I mean, they were done. When the internet came, it gave them a whole new way of putting together, trips and adventures and all kinds of horribly offensive things geared towards the exploitation of children.
What did the NAMBLA name stand for again? Wasn't it?
It was the North American Man-Boy Love Association, I believe.
That's right. Yes, I remember that.
Shocking as that sounds.
So in doing all the different stuff, you also, I mean, you've had all these other shows since the Dateline show, and great YouTube channel, and you have a podcast that's starting, like we talked about, Predators I've Caught, which I think will be fascinating. But let's talk about Peter Nygard, who was, the best, quote unquote, best friend to Jeffrey Epstein. My listeners, we were obsessed with the Jeffrey Epstein story. We've talked about it many times. Can I just get some views about when you heard about Jeffrey Epstein, and had you ever wanted to approach it or do it the first time he got caught and did that like weekend jail in Miami?
Well, you bring up an interesting point and a story that is a real career lesson for me, Heather, and that is, right around 2015, 16, people were talking about Jeffrey Epstein. He had already served a sentence, as you mentioned, the Country Club weekend county jail sentence, and people were saying he was still at it. The stuff was still going on. I met with a group of investigators. I knew that lawyers were representing the potential victims. And quite honestly, we tried to fashion a sting at that point to try to see what was going on. If in fact there was predatory behavior, we would catch it. It became so complicated to do because of the many layers of security that it kind of got set aside. I ended up getting busy with other projects, but it was the Miami Herald, to its credit, that kept chipping away and talking to victims and getting their stories. And ultimately these victims came forward. And that, even according to the U.S. attorney at the time in New York, here in Manhattan, was what led to the prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein. So it's a lesson in, advocacy reporting, investigative enterprise reporting, and staying on top of the story. And that's what we have done, both with the Peter Nygard series, Unseemly, which is coming out in February, and with the series that's on right now called Onision in Real Life, which is about a YouTuber who many people call the Jeffery Epstien of YouTube, who ended up being involved in alleged predatory behavior. And right after the third episode of the series aired, YouTube actually demonetized him. His real name is Gregory Jackson. And it's a story that actually I started covering on the YouTube channel, Have a Seat with Chris Hansen, and it grew into the television series, which is out on Discovery Plus right now. But it's fascinating. And we go into this world that's just, who knew? I mean, I know, your show is also on YouTube. I have a show on YouTube, but, we're reporters and TV people who have a presence on YouTube. The true YouTube world and that culture is a whole different animal. And it's largely unregulated. And you go to YouTube for, some guidance or an interview on this, and they really don't want to touch it. And I understand, obviously better than anyone, that the First Amendment and how important it is, and I've risked my life for it. But some of the things that go on YouTube are just absolutely disturbing, confounding, and virtually unregulated.
Can you tell us a little bit about what this guy was doing on YouTube?
Well, he started out in, the 2007, 2008 time period, and he was just making videos, and they're goofy, funny. They appealed to young teenage women mostly. He had a video called I'm a Banana, and it got, viral after he was on a television show called Posh.0. And suddenly people were flocking to this YouTube channel, and he was entertaining. He'd do skits and little films, and he had a message to young women, especially young, vulnerable women about, it's okay. There's an anti-suicide message. There was an anti-bullying message. And then it twisted into this situation where he was able to prey upon some of the young female viewers and fans, allegedly, and we interview some of them in the documentary. And some of them actually came to his home in Washington State, and the twisted story, and you can see it on Discovery Plus, continues with, what happened to these girls and the damage and the bullying, and then how he used his YouTube channel to viciously attack some of these people when they made, the allegations about him. And I've never seen anything like it. I mean, he attacks me routinely, or did before he was demonetized, for just merely exposing this.
Wow, I did not know about that.
It's an eyeful. Yeah.
Yeah, I just recently just talked a little bit about just the YouTube world, in general, and it and how it really kind of stemmed from some of these top people from that 2007 time, where there were like 10 people that just all were like the top of it.
Well, he was one of them.
Yeah.
And Shane Dawson and
and
many of the others who have been very controversial over the years, and who, because they got in the very early stages, made a lot of money, and they were afforded toolkits and methodology from Google, YouTube, AdSense that aren't available to the average YouTube content creator. So they killed it in the beginning, and there was a real reluctance, I think, on the part of YouTube to clamp down on some of these people, because the money was flowing both to YouTube and to the content creator. So what was nobody was bothering them. There have been some, federal cases and local criminal cases made against some of these people, but generally speaking, it's been a very profitable operation. And again, there's a lot of people teaching you how to fix a car. That's great. A lot of musicians, a lot of people like you and me who go out there and have valuable content. It's not all, crawling with predators type thing, but it does provide that opportunity, and largely because of the lack of regulation. In part 3 of the documentary, the editors actually show the terms of service cartoon that YouTube puts out, and it's sort of like one of those things almost geared toward children. And then they cut the things that Onision, Gregory Jackson, has done on YouTube, and it's a clear violation of the terms and standards of use on YouTube. And that came out literally 24 hours before he was demonetized. And then, of course, there's a criminal investigation involved there too. So we'll be continuing to follow that. There'll be more to come on Discovery Plus, I'm sure.
How old of a guy is he now?
He's in his mid 30s, 34, okay. 35.
And so, yeah, so let me talk a little bit about Peter Nygard.
Sure.
Because this was always such an interesting element to the entire Jeffrey Epstein world. This was the guy that was the head, the CEO or whatever of this big fashion house, which included Limited, Express, and Victoria's Secret. So the way I understand it is...
Actually, I should just clarify.
Yes, correct me if I'm wrong.
So no, you're talking about the head of that company, Nygard, or Epstein was friends with the head of that company. Nygard is head of Nygard Fashions, which is a manufacturer of jeans sold to many department stores at one time, including Dillard. So it's two different guys. So
okay, well, tell me a little bit about this guy. Then you tell me, because maybe I have it mixed up. And was there any connection to Epstein, or is this a completely separate pervert?
Peter Nygard is a completely separate case from Epstein.
Okay.
Now, there have been some connections that have surfaced, potential connections, and some reporting that suggests, Prince Andrew, for instance, was friends with both Nygard and with Epstein. So you've got that potential connection there. And obviously there have been photos with Epstein as well in terms of, Prince Andrew. But what has happened in the Nygard case is that for 50 years, there have been allegations of his sexual impropriety with women, some employees, allegations of sexual assault. And this continued until less than 10 years ago, when he got into a legal battle with another billionaire in the Bahamas. They were neighbors. And there were a series of civil suits which ended up exposing Nygard's alleged predatory behavior. He would, lure underage girls, Bahamian girls from lower income classes to his parties. He called them pamper parties, and they were showered with alcohol, and in some cases drugs and gifts and, beauty services. And he would take advantage of these girls. This would be Peter Nygard.
So they were called pamper parties, like you're going to get pampered, or you're so young, you still need to wear Pampers?
Well, it was, you're going to get pampered, but one has to wonder if there wasn't a double entendre there based upon. So he was doing this in the Bahamas. He was doing it in his LA area home. He had a major home in Winnipeg in Canada. His company is based in Canada. He had headquarters here in New York City. And this continued, and the allegations are just shocking, both in the scope in terms of how many sexual assault cases there are, also in the age of some of these girls, and the fact that he was so into stem cells and trying to keep himself young. He's 79 now, that he would even have some of these girls he allegedly impregnated have abortions. And there was talk of even harvesting those stem cells for injection into his body as some sort of fountain of youth.
Wait, hold on. He'd have them get an abortion, and then he would take the aborted fetus stem cells.
Harvest the stem cells, have somebody do it, and use them for injection in his own body. He was big into the whole stem cell research thing, and he had, a private jet. He would fly to Asia and different areas to learn about stem cells and to take part in stem cell treatments that were not necessarily available in the US at the time, and wanted to set up a whole stem cell operation for himself and others. But, we were fortunate enough in the investigative part of this story that it took, better than a year to actually come across, videos, hundreds of hours of videos chronicling his life, what was happening, the parties, the alleged payoffs of government officials in the Bahamas, and things that really detail this horribly corrupt and criminal lifestyle. And just this past December, he was indicted by a federal grand jury, federal investigators and NYPD investigators who've been looking into this for a long time. But literally, we're talking about a case where the allegations of sexual assault span nearly 50 years and involve dozens and dozens and dozens of women. I mean, it's absolutely stunning. I mean, you know, people talk about the Epstein case, which is horrible. They talk about R. Kelly, which is horrible. They talk about all kinds of cases, but honestly, in all my years, you know, Peter Nygard's case may be the absolute worst that I have ever seen on many different levels. Even one of his sons, after coming to grips with what his father had been doing, has now gone public, is interviewed in the documentary, is cooperating in the federal investigation. And I spoke with him just in the last week or so. And, you know, ironically, it came full circle because he said one of the things that gave him the strength to do all this was going back and watching some of the original Predator investigations. And you know, that was pretty powerful to me.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, so right now, Peter, 79-year-old Peter Nygard, he is sitting in a cell somewhere.
He's sitting in a cell in Winnipeg, Canada, awaiting extradition. He has petitioned the court, and I believe he's back in court very soon to argue that he should be let out for health reasons. And because of COVID-19, the judge has so far not, you know, been amenable to hearing much of that argument, but it will continue. The fear, obviously, you know, among prosecutors and investigators is because he is wealthy, because he's got a private plane, that you know, if he was allowed out, that he would somehow try to flee, because the case is just so strong, and it would be, you know, a life sentence if convicted on this. So the company is in tatters now. It's in trouble because of all this. And what you find out, as in many cases investigating predators, you know, the whispering has been going on for years, and it was kind of an accepted fact in the fashion community, or at least his fashion community, that he was up to this, and he would have these women who he promised stardom or fashion contracts, celebrities of some sort, to these parties and in his compounds. And, you know, when you first show up and see this thing in the Bahamas, it's quite something. It's like an amusement park or Jurassic Park. I mean, it's a major piece of property right on the water, multiple acres. And people are wowed by this until they're drugged and they end up in the, you know, in the secret sex chamber.
In the secret sex chamber, and in all these stories and these, you know, 50 years of abuse, was he the only one that was assaulting the women, or did he have associates that he would pass the women around to?
You know, I have not seen direct evidence of him actually passing, you know, victims onto others. There has been speculation that, you know, this was an opportunity for guys to mingle with available women. But the majority of the criminal allegations in this matter involve specifically Peter Nygard's own behavior and those around him who enabled him, just like in the Epstein case. You know, now we're looking at the enablers, you know, people who saw this but looked the other way, people who actually procured young women for the predator. And that's what we're looking at now in Nygard.
And in all of your investigations, and especially when you were, you know, the first person to do this, catching these predators, were you faced with legal issues where people tried to sue you or say I was entrapped? And did that happen? And how did you or the production company deal with it?
Well, yeah, there was a lot of saber rattling. There was one case where a assistant district attorney in Texas surfaced in the investigation, but didn't show up. The police went to go arrest him. He sadly took his own life. And we later learned that it was most likely because he had child pornography on his computer and he was trying to get it off there, knowing that if he was caught, he'd face 10 years in Texas prison for each pornography image. So there was a lawsuit filed by his sister after that. It was settled, you know, and, you know, oftentimes news companies settle lawsuits because it comes out of an insurance fund as opposed to the news budget, which is where the money comes from when you go to court and fight these things. So everybody was confident in our position. It wasn't my favorite thing to see happen, but it kept everybody, you know, on track and focused on future investigations. So, but other than that, there have been challenges in the courts as to whether this was entrapment. None very successful. Nobody has ever said I was entrapped and gotten off because of that. You know, a couple of cases have wandered through the court system for months and months and months, and there was a no contest plea and, you know, time served and some of them served a long time, 20 some years, sentences we've seen. But generally speaking, the sentences, depending on criminal past, they range around 2 to 5 years, probation sometimes, and then 2 years.
Well, in some ways, I wondered if has anyone ever written you that you caught, like from prison or otherwise, because you truly saved their life. Had you not been there, had they actually committed this crime, they would have done a lot more time. It would have been a lot worse. So have you ever gotten a letter that was, made you feel good about what you did from the actual person that you were catching?
Never got that letter, Heather. I got to be honest with you. I think in just hearing things, there's a whole To Catch a Predator, Hansen versus Predator community, and there are loyal people who keep tabs on the guys who have surfaced in these investigations, and some have contact and back and forth, and we will be reaching out as part of this podcast to some of them. But I have heard secondhand from people in the community that look, there are those who have gone straight and those who may not have without being caught early on in this sort of cycle of behavior. But nobody's reached out to thank me directly. No.
Well, I thank you.
I appreciate that.
So we'll wrap it up in a minute, but I just wanted to ask a little bit more, like, what would you say? Like, I've always been with my kids. My kids now are 21, 18, and 15. But I would always be jokingly sometimes, but extremely honest about, like, if they're playing video games, I'd be like, who are you talking to? A 38-year-old man? And, and we're lucky in that, we were around our kids. We work kind of from home. They never were like getting themselves home from school by themselves. It always seems like they do go after, from the 60s until now, these predators would always choose, the kid whose mom was a widow and he had to work in the cafeteria before school started. And, those kids that didn't have that surrounding, system. And from your perspective, like, is there any good way for parents to continue the conversation, even moms that have toddlers that are going to have to talk about this openly or in the best way in keeping your kids safe, no matter what your situation is?
I think you need to have an age-appropriate discussion, starting with the first experience online or with a cell phone. And anytime a child's got access to a computer, that's access to a potential predator. So you have to say at that early age, look, there are people out there, adults, who like to trick kids. No kid wants to be tricked. And then it goes to, look, there are guys out there, people, adults, who will pretend to be somebody your age, and they're not, who will seem like a stranger on a Tuesday, but will groom you and make you feel comfortable and try to relate to you by the end of the week. And we see it. It's not just kids from homes with two parents working or latchkey kids. I mean, the story that always comes to mind is Alicia Kozak, who's a advocate for, kids online, and herself, beautiful home, suburban Pittsburgh, thought she was chatting with another 13, 14-year-old kid. They went to go meet and ended up being a guy, an adult, who kidnapped her and held her hostage. And if it wasn't for the fact that he streamed this on the internet and people saw it, reported it to the FBI, she may have been killed. She would have been saved in an FBI raid, as she was. And so she specifically tailors her message when she speaks to groups. She's a child safety computer advocate expert, that it doesn't just affect kids from challenge homes or, dual working parent homes. That's not it. Anybody can be a target here. And that's how skilled these people are, in grooming. I mean, you look at the Onision case. Well, the 14, 15-year-old kid who's watching the Onision videos in 2010, 2012, is just taking the message in and not even realizing that, when they're 17 or 18, they get on a plane to fly out there or to send, suspicious pictures, that they're being taken advantage of, because this is a guy who spoke to them, who appealed to them. And they're in a vulnerable age group. And this guy was a celebrity. And so there's nobody who's immune from it.
Yeah, much like the Kelly celebrity aspect of, and
Exactly.
the parents, being, or a Michael Jackson, where the parents were not entertainment savvy. Here, this big person takes an interest in their child who wants to be an entertainer, who they believe also has a lot of talent to be the entertainer. And so they get groomed and they get tricked into allowing their child to be with this predator and spend time alone. And now we look back at, Leaving Neverland, the Michael Jackson
Sure.
documentary, and some of the R. Kelly, and people could sit back in their homes and be quite critical of these parents. But when you're not savvy to the world, and these things were not out there when it was happening to you, for you to reference, hey, this is weird. Hey, I shouldn't let my child go to R. Kelly's house to record music at night. It's so. I mean, what I'm saying is, thank God for the future parents and the current parents of little kids. They're so much better educated than parents from 10, 15 years ago that unfortunately their child became victims.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, the whole goal here in all of these projects is to take the viewer, listener on a journey of discovery, to see things they wouldn't normally see, to hear things they wouldn't normally see, to get in the mind of a predator or criminal, and to hear the voice of a victim. And I think if you do all that, and that's exactly what we try to accomplish, we can better prevent others from becoming victims in the future. And that's the whole mantra here. That's what we do.
And in finding and talking to these people, I always remember there was, I think it was an Oprah that was really disturbing, where the predator, who I think was still behind bars, thank God, kind of exposed his grooming process from, the type of victim he chose, how he ingratiated himself to the child and the parent, how he started with the tickle game, and how they, and that was a more physical thing, that was an online thing. So it'll be interesting to watch your show too and see how they do that online with those steps now from a virtual aspect of gaining the trust, as you said.
No, I think it will be, and I think it's just another medium to reach people and to remind them how important this all is. And it's also fascinating, I think, to go back with the perspective of a year or 2 years, or in some cases 10 or 15 years, to where these guys are now, what happened to them, and what made them tick. And I think it's not only fascinating from a journalistic standpoint, but it's important from a societal standpoint to understand all this.
Did you ever find someone where the wife was devastated and humiliated, but they're still together and she stayed with him and forgave him?
I have, and I have also seen cases where the wife separated or divorced, and years later they got together, and cases where they just, I'm done. This is horrible. I can't deal with this, and you're a bad guy. So it's a bit of everything, really.
And now, is it true, and maybe this scenario, maybe I'll cut it out, I don't know, I just thought of it. Is it true that they don't prosecute pedophilia crimes where they see it as almost like a sexuality in certain countries? Is that true, or is that a fake news story that's going around?
Well,
Like
I think
Greece?
I think in some countries the age of consent is different. I think in some countries there has been a blind eye turned to, the underage sex trade and to sex tourism. I think and hope, based upon my reporting over the last, several years, that that's changing. We did an investigation 10 years ago in Cambodia and infiltrated a brothel which offered girls as young as 6 years old to tourists who were coming there for sex. And by exposing that, I think we created this level of awareness that didn't exist before. And I think there are a lot of NGOs and
What's NGO mean?
Non-government organizations. So
Oh, okay.
so charity organizations that focus on a topic like this, and they will combine the efforts of local law enforcement in a country like Cambodia and the U.S. State Department and federal agents, and they bring attention to this, and they do their own sting operations. And we were involved in one of those in Cambodia, and it was absolutely terrifying, shocking, and eye-opening, but it created awareness that didn't exist before. And so people continue to crack down. So it's not necessarily that the laws allow it or promote it, but I think there are some countries where the culture turns a blind eye to it because, okay, we brought somebody in from, another country, say from Vietnam to Cambodia, and they were dirt poor there, and they were offered a job in a restaurant, and it turns out being a brothel. And so, this is human trafficking. And the same thing happens in this country too. People are trafficked all the time, young women in,
Right. It's
in,
horrible.
social media.
Well, Chris, this was fascinating. I am so excited about your upcoming projects. Just tell everybody where they can watch the shows and listen to the podcast and all of the info.
The podcast Predators I've Caught is now on Apple and will expand soon, Apple Podcasts. The 2 new series, Unseemly, coming out in February. The Peter Nygard investigation on Discovery Plus, and Onision in Real Life out right now on Discovery Plus. We've got the YouTube channel Have a Seat with Chris Hansen, where we do the new Predator investigations, as well as other very important programming. And we'll have new Predator investigations soon on the TV, and I'll be able to make that announcement hopefully very soon.
Well, I'm so glad that you've continued to do what you do, and it's more important than ever. And I'm really excited about all your projects. And it was great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Well, great to talk to you. We'll speak soon.
Well, thank you so much, you guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate you telling other people about Juicy Scoop and leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, and also subscribing to not only the podcast, but check out the YouTube page as well. Everything is at heathermcdonald.net. See you on Patreon, and great show coming this Thursday. Love you.